Here we are at Super Week TV 20. Okay. No? Oh, that wasn't it?
There's a weird perfect storm, I guess, at the moment, right? We do have these conflicts on the world stage, but we also have the repercussions of the GDPR and other privacy regulation happening, and we're all recovering from the pandemic. And that all those three things are happening at the same time. There's probably a couple of other things I've forgotten, but it does seem like we're at a unique spot that is affecting the way everyone is thinking about data and about analytics.
It forced us to look at things differently, that's for sure. And let's keep in mind, we had the war and COVID.
Things are going really in a very intense atmosphere in all stages. So with all these dynamics in place, it's really hard to predict what will go to happen. Yeah, but I think the coming 2023 will be really pivotal year in the history of privacy.
Privacy. 2023 was all about privacy. But it wasn't just about privacy, data protection, or security for that matter. We were talking about what's going to happen and where we will end up. It was the bigger question of rights and wrongs, about how privacy and data protection wasn't only affecting the data that we were working with, but how it was affecting people and countries.
I would want us to arrive at kind of global legislation for the digital space and try to piece by piece pick away the geolocation restrictions for some of the data that we need to work across everything. So I feel like the conclusion is given, but right now mistrust is guiding the choices that legislation is making.
The situation is still quite fluid. There has been pushing back and forth between the European Union and the US, mainly about the Transatlantic Data Agreement. And I think to some degree the whole industry in the next couple of months, even couple of years, will be shaped based on the outcomes of this agreement.
Security from an infrastructure perspective and security in terms of data uses to prevent harm. This is where privacy comes in. This is where this idea of data protection, which is not about only the technical infrastructure, but also thinking how the data can be misused.
It's no longer about, are we going to get fined by GDPR? Now it's actually a bigger thing. It's people's lives are at stake, our country's sovereignty is at stake, our society is at stake.
And that's the point. It wasn't just about GDPR, EU-US adequacy, or privacy and data protection. It was about society, ethics, and what's really right or wrong. And how does it affect people, countries, and society at large?
What should society, I'll go beyond sort of governments, be putting in place to say, yeah, but we're going to put hard locks on that. We're going to use it for that transactional need, but you know what? Maybe we need to really aggressively wipe that data quickly, because if it lingers for very long, then it's at the risk of getting out.
The GDPR mantra of map your data flows is just so important. Where is my data going? What's the downstream? Where are my Google searches flowing to? Who knows what my search history is? What is it being used for? If I take a Yandex cab in Helsinki, what happens? Where is that data going?
That data is spreading, and that's a problem when you've got geopolitical forces that are kind of trying to go take things away from other territories.
We now know even better than before how much surveillance, foreign surveillance, how much espionage, how much cyber espionage there's happening all the time. And wars of information, any bit of hybrid warfare has to do with taking data from a nation and manipulating it so that they can control the nation. And we see that all the time, and yet it absolutely becomes a scenario where we need to be careful.
In times of strife and struggle, we see the very worst in humanity, but we also see the very best. And I guess that's where I see hope.
We're seeing more collaboration also, at least from my side, between security people and privacy people, between analytics people and privacy people, between lawyers and data engineers, to try to build these bridges.
And whilst we as an industry are starting to build bridges, the general consensus from our data thought leaders is how data privacy is no longer just a matter of personal privacy or even about compliance with the GDPR. The focus has also shifted into how data can be used as a political weapon, also as a weapon for geopolitical conflict, and ultimately the survival of humanity.
It becomes this ethical dilemma of how much do we need to bend those ethical principles if we want to win a war, if we want to win a pandemic. Like, how much should we relax those fundamental protections that we have as citizens for our own data protection, or do we need to relax them? And if we do need to relax them, how do we prevent that from becoming a precedent in the future where anybody can now say, okay, there's a crisis, let's relax those, like a force majeure kind of thing.
Because as soon as I know something about you and I have it in a digital form, there's no telling whose hands it's going to be in, whether it's my current government, whether it's some future government if I get invaded, whether if it's my competitor. So, what's best is if I don't have that data. And part of me wants to go back to the 1950s from how did we do, marketing. And part of me thinks, the government, I see the benefits of digital data being connected. There is a convenience benefit for people, but I think the convenience benefit for people generally should come after what is the way they're guaranteed that their data is not going to get in the hands of someone who can misuse it or abuse it or do something with it that individual really doesn't want done.
Right. Man, it's like a really sensitive topic to me because there are a lot of cases that shows that even smart people who skilled enough and they can deal with data freely, they fail once data highlights some conclusions that are opposite to their standpoints, political judgments, and their belief. If we want to, develop our civilization and live in a better world, at least for our children, we need to take this responsibility to change our mind and to be open to the new insights, no matter if we like it or not.
Transparency with technology is not very complicated, but you also make it very opaque. So it depends on, where is your incentive and how would this be enforced if you don't do that? And I'm a proponent of clearly the GDPR and what the European Commission does. Do I think it's perfect? No. Do I wonder about what's coming? Well, certainly. It's how are we going to do the enforcement of the next legislations that's coming? But at least we're trying.
So where are we going, and what is the future of data, privacy, and what can data do to actually better society? We are aware of the potential dangers with the misuse of data, but how can we move forward and use data in this rapidly changing world? How can data improve our way of life? How can we use data to understand the effects of war? And ultimately, how can the internet and data serve humanity, not be a threat to humanity?
But as far as how does it prepare us for the next big thing, I think what we're also seeing is people are going to want to be more self-sufficient and sovereign in a lot of different ways. It could be communications, it could be energy, it can be food supply, finding ways around, for instance, infrastructure problems such as, oh hey, a telco center was destroyed by a missile strike, or the Russians are occupying the next region over with a telecom center. So that forced them to be more creative in, let's say, rearranging the communication architecture, or infrastructure rather. That forced them, like Alexis said yesterday, of finding creative ways to access information.
We shouldn't have to see a presentation like that. But now that the war is there and people are doing this work, it is fascinating.
He showed us various slides and various statistics and charts and stuff about how you could actually see the Ukrainian conflict play out in standard web analytics data, the stuff that we're normally looking at, and just raw traffic. So he was able to show us month 1, month 2, month 3, and you could basically see the population leaving their homes and moving westward, taking their phones, they're leaving their computers behind.
We talk about e-commerce and we talk about delivery and the last mile in Ukraine under wartime. And so I think this is something we need to start taking into consideration, that this internet that we've built is not permanent and is not avoided from threat, and we need to support our infrastructure from a security standpoint.
I'm worried that people think that what's happening in Ukraine is just an isolated incident and we can just, let's bend the rules for once and then we'll get back to normal. I think we've now passed the point where it's just an isolated incident. We are now facing a lot of global turmoil in the next 10 years. And we have to redo much of our regulations and legislations to account for the fact that it might not be just about our own personal protections anymore. Our personal protections are also tied to the protections of our entire society.
I think the most important thing, I just want to reiterate that the most important thing that anybody can do right now, anywhere in the world, is to reach out and make connections. Because everybody, during the pandemic, during the crisis in Ukraine, and I don't want to call it a crisis, I hate it when people do that, during the war, people are lonely. People are scared. People are getting laid off like left and right. People are terrified. People want jobs. People want security. The best thing that those of us who have security can do is reach out and make those connections.
If we look at business challenges, the global economy was only beginning to recover from this once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. Then we move straight into another chapter of crisis that once again affects the entire world. The war has accelerated a global recession and everyone is feeling the effects of high inflation. Further uncertainties have hit business with some technological changes, Google rolling out GA4 and replacing the previous Universal Analytics, and the emergence of powerful AI tools. So what is the state of business globally, and how are these changes going to affect how businesses operate?
When I look at the state of the industry in 2023, what I see is basically a maturing. I see this as a shift to what I have in my own world called the decision economy. So for me, and I see this as a big theme this year, has been this about the decision. And there's a lot of circumstances around that where, with a recession going on now, that value of making qualified decisions become even more important. So it's much more about the return on analytics is becoming much clearer because other people are beginning to depend on the data that we provide. And the same thing would go for all the qualification now with the data being adopted into machine learning and AI. So the value of the data is actually becoming much more tangible. We can almost touch the money that analytics is making. Almost.
Every year there is something new happening, and a new kind of a magic kick that forces a shift in the industry. So you can't get used to it. You can't have like one thing. It's just like now it's a feeling of like there is something every year that you need to be more resilient as well.
How you want to measure, what you want to measure, and having the flexibility to do so rather than having a vendor lock-in where this vendor is giving this model and we have to fit our business model into that. And that's what we've seen. And that may work, you may fit in now, but maybe 6 months or 6 years down the road, you are stuck in that model. And that means you are actually creating a technical debt yourself that you can't get yourself out of.
We're getting now data at scale. So we need to have an infrastructure that can handle that data either by clouds, using automation to ensure as well that we have a kind of a standard process, a standard taxonomy, an infrastructure that can scale up with that volume of data, not at present time, but if we're talking in the 5 years, we need that infrastructure ready to kind of handle that volume of data as well.
There's something more fundamental happening. The more fundamental piece is a shift to look at the way we maybe approach data using more traditional statistics, which is all just going to get wiped away in a couple of years because people are going to be able to feed their data into something and just ask a free question.
Digital analytics is in a space of transformation. It's still a quite young field, but it's been assisted in its maturation by the standards provided by Google and other big players in the field. But now we're seeing, also with the shift to GA4, not least, but due to general developments in terms of how do we even create web experiences, I think that those standards are being challenged.
Analytics is not going anywhere. I think it is going to massively change. I think between all of the things happening in AI and all of the things happening in privacy, those are both like two seismic shifts that are both going to impact our industry quite a bit. And no one can say, what does that mean? What is the industry going to look like in 5 years? So I think the industry isn't going anywhere. I think there's going to be a lot of thought and experimentation required for us to figure out what's the new normal, what's the new world look like.
As we see these seismic shifts in our industry, we as an industry need to navigate these changes. We need to help organizations and brands navigate this future of uncertainty. This road won't be easy as uncharted territories don't come with a playbook or a roadmap. So, what can we anticipate in the journey ahead? What are the major changes we should be aware of? And what changes should we be making?
And I think we also have to figure out, like, when you say my data, some of it's the company's data too. And so I think we're struggling. I feel like the industry in a way is struggling to find that balance.
Inequalities are growing. So the balance of power due to technology, the internet was supposed to flatten everybody and give equal chances. But we're seeing that the way technologies are being used with certain positions by certain actors creates monopolies. Asymmetries of powers have rooted inside the digital realm. And this needs to be rebalanced one way or another. It's not as easy as before to be a small startup and grow. And this needs to be seeded and needs to be supported.
But the reality is it's quite often either the marketing technology vendors in those areas that are leveraging or putting cookies in places where they shouldn't be. Soon, and I say soon, but Chrome has pushed back their depreciation of third party quite a lot because they know that they make a lot of money through display, and the moment you can't do third party pixels in Chrome is the day that Google loses a chunk of data. Now they're not a bad actor, give or take, but the people who can use their networks to still serve third-party cookies today to non-iOS devices, and that's where I think privacy will have to set a bar that people need to meet.
So we have some challenges for Google and Meta on their advertising business. For example, the challenge to the Meta advertisements based on not being able to use it personal advertising. That would mean really challenging the Meta to continue in Europe.
The emergence of online behavioral data has played a vital role in shaping how brands go to market. And this has shifted billions of dollars from the publishing industry to technology companies such as Google and Meta. This shift of the advertising dollar to technology companies has created the industry as we know it today. But what about the user journey? What are the best practices in converting a user into a customer? What experiences is this online world providing for them?
The advertising industry is what's really hurt our industry. I think there's a lot of bad practices in terms of, you look at something on a website and suddenly that pair of shoes is following you all around the internet. Many organizations can't control the advertising part. They can't control that I don't know who's coming to my website, and I can't control that my attribution models are maybe not as good as they used to be because of GDPR and other legislation. But what they can control is when someone actually arrives to their website or their app, that's what they can control.
We don't want to be siphoning, we don't want to be scooping up information that doesn't belong to us, right? We shouldn't be storing information that doesn't belong to us, but some of the information is fairly, I think, the company's property.
Many brands still don't have that first-party data strategy. It's more important than ever right now to build a first-party data strategy, and this is going to help marketeers to stay relevant but also privacy compliant.
You have privacy first. That forces a lot of the companies to rethink about their data strategy. First-party data strategy, privacy first, collect data for a purpose. All this will actually have a downstream effect in terms of better data quality.
Yes, we need to collect first-party data. Third-party cookies are being depreciated. Google Chrome will eventually shut them off. So we need to collect first-party data. We need to own our own data. More importantly, it's starting to become about the customer, the person at the other end. Users are becoming so much more aware of what first-party and third-party data is. They're hearing and seeing cookies everywhere. It's those banners. It started to become something that an everyday person is thinking about their privacy. What data are you collecting? What data are you not collecting? So it's become so much bigger than the GDPR or any data protection laws.
And you could say that, okay, well, that's all driven by the GDPR, but I don't really think that that's true. I think that that's because we're getting like a society-wide reset about how everyone, not just us, but the actual general normal population of real people are thinking about their data. And I guess I should say that there's really a fourth thing, right, which is there's privacy, the war, pandemic. At least this is just in my mind, the fourth thing is that we're really finally at the point where the general population of the world understands that data is one of the things that's going to be manipulated going forward.
The most time they spend is on cleaning data. If all these regulations in place actually move us into a better place to make sure better data collection, better schema, better data structure, less cleaning, less effort need to be spent on tidying up all the messy data, that will just improve the whole flow of efficiency. You will realize you will see the impact a lot quicker.
But one of the things that I think we are missing out on when we're talking about this is what do we believe are the right ways to do marketing? What are the right ways to do experience? So rather than sitting and being a retrospective department that answers questions from sales, from marketing, I think our role could be to go and actually influence some of the methods that are in place for marketing and how they are then connected to the data.
So when you have that process, all this principle strategy in place, people will trust the data better, and also you just have more confidence It's more reliable that you can work with the data rather than doubting whether the data is right in the first place.
And that's the beauty of all the legislation. The place we're in now. It challenges us. It makes us think about what we need to collect and why we need to collect it. It forces us to follow the best practices we already know but get sloppy on. It's considering how we can do something better without having to disrespect our users.
Once we lose the ability to track people through cookies, I think there's going to be an enormous amount of pressure on organizations to say, what can we do to incent the people who are visiting us to tell us who they are? That's why product-led growth is a big trend we're hearing about, where companies are giving a little bit of value in order to find out who you are. You would use the product for a while, they would see how you're using the product, and eventually they would offer you features that you only get if you pay. So this product-led growth, they're not investing in marketing anymore. And there are thousands of startups out there that are saying, we don't want to buy Google keywords. That was so 1990s. We want to spend our money not in the marketing department, but on the actual digital product.
In a way, we've got back to two hits. Everyone is talking about like event level data collection. So we're tracking everything the same way for apps and for websites. There's GA4, there's Amplitude, there's Adobe. So everyone is sort of going back to the roots in a way, where we measure things in a very unitary fashion.
It's interesting that we go from marketing analytics a bit into the product analytics, and Amplitude is going from marketing analytics into product analytics. Google Analytics 4 is kind of like went from web analytics to product analytics, but they say it's for both. So it's I think this is something that there won't be a clear difference that you have product analytics and marketing analytics, and that's good because in the end you look for the whole customer journey.
Analytics tools are diversifying in how we look at our data. Is it by product, by marketing, or by user? Ultimately, as the collective people behind brands, we need to service both the customer whilst build the strength of the brand with both strong products and quality marketing. But are all companies really ready for this data mindset?
If you think of all of the Silicon Valley startups, they are really low on marketing and really high on product teams and engineers and data scientists. And marketing, it's just not a big push for them. Now, once they get bigger, then they spend some time on marketing and branding and so on.
I appreciate the debate about product analytics. Sure, yeah, or marketing analytics. I understand there's a difference between the two, but to be fair, it's more about how you position your product, because in the end, they measure the exact same thing.
We are hopefully moving to a place where it's kind of less about competing who finds the best latest trend or who has the best engineering solution. We kind of come back to our roots of thinking, how do we support each other find these solutions? How do we support each other's skills? How do we bring the humane back to our work? Which is ironically kind of being compromised with all these advances in AI, where the humane is kind of being drifted out.
So much of what we do in our industry is behavioral, understanding how do people behave. That will remain evergreen. So you can throw as much technology on it as you want, but it's really about this. What's in the head and what drives people and how they think.
Analytics, be it marketing or product analytics, is ultimately about the user. About us getting into their brains and understanding what it is they need from us. And it was the same with privacy. It's about our user. It's not about the GDPR or the various US privacy laws. They're all different, but essentially, we're all trying to do the same thing. We're trying to respect our users' data. And with time, they will all meet, and we will all meet where it becomes about the future.
We kind of set GDPR as the standard for everything in our business, but I would say the big difference is that, you know, in the United States, we don't have the same rules and we're allowed to do a lot more with it.
I worked for 11 years in the UK, so during when GDPR kicked in. Then 4 years ago, I moved to Canada. Most of the clients that through Canada were US. And the attitude and understanding and definition of privacy is very drastically different. And risk averseness as well. Because people, like there's like the word compliance in the Northern America side, like it's like, oh, yes, we'll deal with that. Whereas compliance and privacy in the UK, actually, they will start listening to you.
What we've seen in Europe is they've taken quite a specific stance on it at the moment. I think that will calm down a bit over the next 10 years. And I think that the US will come up to meet it, but probably not go as far. So I think if we were to try to draw it, I would say that Europe comes down a little bit, allowing pseudo-anonymous identifiers for people to be cohorted and then targeted by cohort, which we're seeing a lot of people do in the space at the moment. And I think the US will have to catch up a little bit from a privacy perspective.
I think the culture of our societies is where the difference is. Our culture is like, track me all you want, I don't really care. However, in Europe, there's a whole different culture in regards to, I don't want you to have my data, I don't want you to know who I am. So I think that cultural dynamic is the harder part, and as an American, even speaking at this conference, there's a big leap between what I'm saying and what people are hearing. I might be saying something is pink, somebody else is gonna hear it's purple, right?
Unfortunately, because of the way legislation works in the US, it will have to be state by state initially. And then I think a lot of global countries will also come up to meet that with certain standards that businesses have to adhere to.
The experimentation world is actually further ahead in the European market than in the US market. I'm not sure why, but it is. It's more advanced, and I think part of it could be a willingness to fail faster, a willingness to innovate, folks getting together and sharing knowledge in Europe. It's easier to get together here.
It will come to a point where we can find a standardized privacy law across all countries. But I think the most important thing is asking ourselves, why are we collecting that data? Is it really beneficial to the customer? Or are we utilizing first-party data in an ethical way?
There is a balance between enhancing user personalization and respecting user privacy. The world is more connected in communication, business and culture. Whilst we are interconnected, we still have challenges of different standards, of different regulations from country to country, and in the US, state by state. Different attitudes, different cultures and generations. So what is the way forward? And how do brands evolve? And where do we invest?
I think that just sped up digitalization, and we may slow down a bit, like e-commerce is already slowing down, and some vendors need to reassess the investments they did. They invested too much simply in the online, but that sped up the transformation, which is good.
Yeah, maybe it's a kind of a reality wake-up call. That, companies have less money, investors are pissed off because they are losing massively since the COVID, and the governments are out of money. We have a war that increased the prices of energy and putting a lot of uncertainty on what's happening in the future. So everyone started now questioning, like, maybe it's better we keep that money and really put it in things that would give us a higher return.
Now we are entering kind of like recession type of environment, which will just make all the companies assess the investments that they made, whether they should kill it or they should keep doing that.
Recession drives efficiency, because the more you get financial pressure, you need to be more efficient and really spend the money where it's worth it. So I think when it comes to efficiency, this is where data would really shine, because you can use data to really know what's worth the investment.
The war has kind of opened the eyes to saying there's also something, even though everything might look good on the surface, they can change really fast. Suddenly, war can come out of nowhere. Recession can come out of nowhere. So how can we protect the business from these outside forces? How can we minimize our risks in this? So instead of looking at opportunities, then it's very much about minimizing risks.
For the digital analytics industry, we are relatively safe here, because if you want to be more efficient, you have to have this data and make decisions based on the data rather than just throw money at the problem.
Yes, I think we are in the kind of transcending state in the industry. It's always something that is changing, but I guess now it's for the normal analyst, the way I'm coming from, and now it's actually a clear shift, like you have to change what you typically do in order to adapt and continue to be in the industry.